Good afternoon folks, welcome to Visordown, welcome to Portugal and welcome to the launch of Triumph's Tiger Sport 800. Yes, that's right, it's 2025 and Triumph has already made the Tiger range just a little bit more confusing because as if there weren't enough bikes in there already. I'm going to try and explain it as best as I can. So this is plugging a gap in the sporty GT sector within the Tiger range. Yes, you've got the Tiger 900 GT and GT Pro, which you can go out and buy, but they feature a T-plane engine. And for some people, me included, on the road, the T-plane engine can be a little bit lumpy, a little bit bumpy and not quite as smooth running as the previous 180-degree crank engine that you used to get in the old Tiger 800s like the XC and the XCA and stuff like that. So, as ever, I'm going to run through it, I'm going to tell you all about it, I'm going to tell you what we've been doing and how I've found it out on the road today. So this is £10,955 and think of it really, if you will, as a bit of a Tiger 1050 Sport for the modern era. It has got a 798cc engine. I'm going to go through the engine in a bit more detail in a minute of how it came about and what it actually is. But it pumps out 113 bhp claimed by Triumph and 62 pound-foot of torque. The bike overall is 214 kilogram. That is the wet weight, so that is including fluids but no fuel. We have got a seat height of 835 millimeters. Obviously it's a Triumph Triple, so most of that torque is available all the way through the mid-range, and Triumph is claiming this bike has got 90% of its peak torque available all the way through the mid-range. So from about 3,500 RPM basically all the way to the top, you have got 90% of that 62 pound-foot of torque. Chassis-wise, we have got a chassis that is almost identical to the Tiger Sport 660. What Triumph wanted to do with this bike was keep the packaging small, keep it nice and light and nice and compact. So what they did, they took the Tiger Sport 660 chassis and then they adapted it so this slightly larger engine could be slotted into that chassis. But the geometry, the swing arm, wheelbase, all of that sort of good stuff is all the same as the Tiger Sport 660. Suspension wise, we've got slightly more premium suspension on this one than the 660. We have got fully adjustable Showa separate function big piston forks at the front, and we've got a fully adjustable Showa rear shock with a remote preload adjuster, because in this sector that is kind of a very important feature. You've got 4-pot brakes, which are J-Juans. They're the same setup that we had on the Speed Twin 1200 that I was riding a couple of weeks ago, so they're nice and strong and powerful. And we've got a 6-axis IMU taking care of all of the ABS and the lean sensitive traction control, which is all good. You've got an 18.6 litre tank, which in this class is about right. It's about where it needs to be, between sort of 17 and 20 litres is where most of the other bikes in there are. And you've got 3 riding modes, you've got cruise control, this one's got heated grips, and it comes with an up and down shifter and blipper as standard. It is shod with Michelin Road 5 tyres. So what have we done on it? We've done about 140 miles. We got on the road at about 8 o'clock. We got off the road at about 4 o'clock. It's been a pretty full-on day, to be honest with you. It started out in the most biblical rain that you could ever imagine. If it had carried on like that until lunchtime, I would have probably just ridden back to the hotel and gone and sat in a bar somewhere. But luckily enough, the sun came out and it has been beautiful all afternoon. So we actually got quite a good test, because we got the morning riding it in the wet mode, as you know, the weather is back home in the UK right now. It's quite wet and gloomy and cold and not very nice. And then this afternoon we got to experience it on dry roads, really in its natural habitat, and we've got to take it up through the riding modes and see how it performs. I'm going to start by talking about the engine. I mean, don't think of this as just a slightly more powerful version of the 660 engine, because it's not. Obviously the performance of it is a quantum leap over and above what the 660 can do. And don't think of it either as just a bored and stroked version of the 660 engine, because it's not. It's got different crankcases, it's got different barrels, obviously different pistons, there have been adaptations to the top end. It's also got a 3 inlet system, a bit like the Daytona 660, which has got 3 fuel injection inlets as opposed to the one that you get on some of the other models that use the 660 engine. So it has been completely revised and completely changed. Starting in the rain mode earlier on today, I was quite surprised because the engine still felt incredibly gutsy all the way through the mid-range, and it still felt very pokey at the top. It felt to me almost as if all that the rain mode was doing was softening up the throttle map and just turning up the traction control and maybe just clipping a little bit of the peak power that you were getting from the motor, because it was still actually really quick. And after the rain had stopped and the road had dried, I was still riding around in rain mode, and actually, to be honest, I didn't feel like it was holding me back too much, which was quite surprising. This afternoon, once the roads had dried, we got to experience it in the full fat sport mode, and if you wanted to, you can go in and turn all the traction control off. And again, it still felt as gutsy in the middle and as powerful at the top. It just felt like the throttle connection was much sharper and much more direct. It is a serious contender. The engine is very, very nice in this. The T-plane crank, I'm a big fan of. I'm a big fan of the T-plane crank in the 900 and the 1200. But it is so much better suited to riding off-road in terms of the way that it delivers the power to the rear wheel, the way it makes that tyre hook up when you're riding on loose surfaces, and then when you get it on the road, kind of you do sort of long for the sort of more traditional inline 3-cylinder drives that you get out the corners, and that delivery and the smoothness that you get from an engine like that, which is absolutely great. You can be so lazy with the gears with this bike. It's supremely gutsy, like all of the Triumph triples are, so you can dance up and down the box if you want to and make the most of the revs, or you can leave it in second and third gear and just drive out the hairpins using that mid-range torque, which is absolutely brilliant. Well, I'm talking about changing gears. You've got a 6-speed box which is hooked up to an up and down shifter and blipper. You've also got a slipper clutch. The quick shifter works very well. The lever it's quite a firm lever. You do have to give it a bit of a shove to get it engaged, but it's always direct. You never find a false neutral at all, which was brilliant. And the slipper clutch, even when it was wet earlier on today, was doing an excellent job of gobbling up any extra torque as we're breaking down in some of the tighter hairpin bends. On the electronics front, I kind of feel like Triumph have implemented the electronics that everybody needs, but not the electronics that some people think that they want, if you know what I mean. There are some bikes in this sort of sub 150 horsepower sporty touring category, things like Multistrada V2, that have got more trick electronic suspension. There are other bikes in this sort of sector, Tracer 9 GT Plus, that has got the electronic suspension, and it's got radar assisted cruise control, and it's got this emergency braking assist function where it'll brake a little bit harder if it thinks you're going to run into the car in front. And I think sometimes a lot of that is manufacturers saying, look at this cool thing that we've designed, and look what we can do, and we've put it on this bike and you can go and buy it. And then sometimes when you sit down and think about it, you think, well, do we actually need any of that stuff? This bike is a little bit more stripped back than that. You've got the 3 riding modes, rain, road and sport, which are fine. You feel the difference as you move up through the modes, and you can turn off the traction control system if you want to, which is great. Got a TFT, and a lot of people bemoan the fact that it's an LCD rev counter with a TFT below, but in my mind you can do all of the things with this setup that you can with a full screen TFT, so it doesn't really matter. It's just not quite a flashy setup, but what it does is it allows Triumph to keep it around that sort of £10,000 price mark, which is very good. I'm going to talk about the handling of it, because that's been one of the standout features. We got that brilliant, well, I say brilliant, I was absolutely soaked through to my skin. It was vile, my boots were full of water and so were my gloves. But what it did do was it allowed us to understand how the bike handled in the wet. And it was very confidence inspiring. In the rain mode with the slightly softer throttle mat, we've got Michelin Road 5 hoops on the thing. It just felt really, really confidence inspiring. It wasn't a bike whenever that you tipped it into a corner, you felt like you were on a knife edge, or it was going to tuck or it was going to slide. There was absolutely none of that. It just handled it all perfectly, which bodes very well for UK riders who might be riding one of these things through winter, commuting, hacking, touring, whatever. That is a standout feature of it. This afternoon, when we got dry weather, was when we really got to explore the sport part of the Tiger Sport 800, and that was equally as good. It is a phenomenally nice handling bike. The agility is one of the standout features, and that is, it's kind of thanks to the suspension and thanks to those compact dimensions and the fact that it is quite light in this class of bikes that it is in. I'll talk about the suspension. It is Showa suspension. It is adjustable, so you can tune it in. I didn't touch any of that today. It was absolutely brilliant. You've got quite a lot of travel, about 150 millimeters of travel at both ends. But what I will say is that the movement of this bike as it goes through that travel is always composed and always controlled. So you don't ever get the feeling that it is starting to get a bit unwieldy. The only one person on this launch who moaned a little bit about the suspension was a person who's formerly a racer and has, you know, lined up on World Supersport grids and that sort of stuff. And they said there was one moment, you've been riding the bike all day, and then they feel they need to rev the engine. Like, people have heard the engine, dude, chill out. The only person that moaned about it was this one person who's super, super fast, but the characteristic that they described, I would never even be able to feel on the road anyway, because I just don't go that fast. Gonna talk about the brakes very quickly. I experienced this braking hardware, maybe not these pads, but the calipers and master cylinder on the Speed Twin 1200 launch. And just as I found on that launch, these brakes are bloody good. They are Jejuan, they're not Brembos or anything as flashy as that, but in terms of the job that they do and the way that they stop this bike being just, you know, a bit over 200 kilograms, yeah, supremely powerful. Another one, I found that the rear brake is very powerful as well, which is not something you can say on all of the bikes in this segment, but I really like a strong rear brake for just trailing that as you're cornering. Helps keep the bike sort of hunkered down and composed, and the rear brake on this thing is very strong. ABS isn't too intrusive, but there aren't really many options to go in and tune it anyway, so you are just going to sort of have to like it and lump it. Da, 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 da. Are there any bad bits? I found the pegs to be quite vibey. I didn't get anything through the seat, tank or the handlebars, but I found the pegs to be vibey. Because it's a sport, they're not rubber damped, they are kind of like knurled design. Yeah, I did get a bit of vibe through there. I reckon probably if you could stuff a rubber insert in there, it would probably help that. And the only other thing really is they've stuck an adjustable screen on it, which is great, but it is quite a heave when you're riding to get the thing pulled up. But the bonus of it is you can do it with one hand, and there are a lot of bikes that I've ridden, well, there's two already that I've ridden in the last 3 months that have got adjustable screens, but you've got to get off the bike and stop to adjust the thing, which is just complete. It's a madness, people. It's an absolute madness. So, the verdict on the Tiger Sport 800. This feels for me like it ticks a lot more boxes for a lot more riders than any of the other Tiger 900 models. In terms of, yeah, the Tiger 900s are brilliant at going on road. They're probably my favourite mid-weight adventure bike to go and just take off road, that can also do all of the other things, all of the road touring and all of the sporty riding and stuff like that. But this has got absolutely no compromises in any of its design or any of its creation that holds it back in any way when you just use it in the way that it's meant to be used, and that's just riding it hard on the road. It's comfortable, you've got room for two, you've got luggage options including the back box and panniers, you can go long distance, you've got a decent sized fuel tank, it's smooth, it's comfortable. There's really not a lot to you know, dislike about it. The handling and the engine are the two standout features. The handling is brilliant. I think the triple engine is superbly versatile and also very, very entertaining. And that confidence inspiring handling when you're riding in the wet or the dry just makes it an absolutely brilliant bike. This does, for me, feel like Triumph's best bike of 2025 has already arrived, and we are only 25 days into January. So there you go. Listen folks, that has been enough for me. I've been Toad for Visordown.com, and if you've liked that video, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of Visordown's latest videos. And for all the latest news, reviews and motorcycle features, get yourself over to Visordown.com.